Book 2, Chapter 15 of Resurrection. Count Ivan Mikhailovich had been a minister and was a man of strong convictions. The convictions of Count Ivan Mikhailovich consisted in the belief that, just as it was natural for a bird to feed on worms, to be clothed in feathers and down, and to fly in the air, so it was natural to him to feed on the choicest and most expensive food, prepared by highly paid cooks, to wear the most comfortable and most expensive clothing, to drive with the best and fastest horses, and that therefore all these things should be ready found for him. Besides this, Count Ivan Mikhailovich considered that the more money he could get out of the treasury by all sorts of means, the more orders he had, including different diamond insignia of something or other, and the oftener he spoke to highly placed individuals of both sexes, so much the better it was. All the rest Count Ivan Mikhailovich considered insignificant and uninteresting beside these dogmas. All the rest might be as it was, or just the reverse. Count Ivan Mikhailovich lived and acted according to these lights for 40 years, and at the end of 40 years reached the position of a minister of state. The chief qualities that enabled Count Ivan Mikhailovich to reach this position were his capacity of understanding the meaning of documents and laws, and of drawing up, though clumsily, intelligible state papers, and of spelling them correctly. Secondly, his very stately appearance, which enabled him, when necessary, to seem not only extremely proud, but unapproachable and majestic, while at other times he could be abjectly and almost passionately servile. Thirdly, the absence of any general principles or rules, either of personal or administrative morality, which made it possible for him either to agree or disagree with anybody according to what was wanted at the time. When acting thus, his only endeavour was to sustain the appearance of good breeding, and not to seem too plainly inconsistent. As for his actions being moral or not in themselves, or whether they were going to result in the highest welfare or greatest evil for the whole of the Russian Empire, or even the entire world, that was quite indifferent to him. When he became minister, not only those dependent on him, and there were a great many of them, and people connected with him, but many strangers, and even he himself, were convinced that he was a very clever statesman. But after some time had elapsed, and he had done nothing, and had nothing to show, and when in accordance with the law of the struggle for existence others, like himself, who had learnt to write and understand documents, stately and unprincipled officials, had displaced him, he turned out to be not only far from clever, but very limited and badly educated. Though self-assured, his views hardly reaching the level of those in the leading articles of the Conservative papers, it became apparent that there was nothing in him to distinguish him from those other badly educated and self-assured officials who had pushed him out, and he himself saw it. But this did not shake his conviction that he had to receive a great deal of money out of the treasury every year, and new decorations for his dress clothes. This conviction was so firm that no one had the pluck to refuse these things to him, and he received yearly, partly in form of a pension, partly as a salary for being a member in a government institution and chairman of all sorts of committees and councils, several tens of thousands of roubles, besides the right, highly prized by him, of sewing all sorts of new cords to his shoulders and trousers, and ribbons to wear under, and enamel stars to fix on to his dress coat. In consequence of this, Count Ivan Mikhailovich had very high connections. Count Ivan Mikhailovich listened to Nekhludoff as he was wont to listen to the reports of the permanent secretary of his department, and, having heard him, said he would give him 2 notes, one to the senator Wolf of the Appeal Department. All sorts of things are reported of him, but dans tous les cas c'est un homme très comme il faut, he said. He is indebted to me, and will do all that is possible. The other note Count Ivan Mikhailovich gave Nekhludoff was to an influential member of the Petition Committee. The story of Theodosia Birukov, as told by Nekhludoff, interested him very much. When Nekhludoff said that he thought of writing to the Empress, the Count replied that it certainly was a very touching story, and might, if occasion presented itself, he told her. But he could not promise. Let the petition be handed in due form. Should there be an opportunity, and if a petit comité was called on Thursday, he thought he would tell her the story. As soon as Nekhludoff had received these two notes, and a note to Mariette from his aunt, he at once set off to these different places. First he went to Mariette's. He had known her as a half-grown girl, the daughter of an aristocratic but not wealthy family, and had heard how she had married a man who was making a career, whom Nekhludoff had heard badly spoken of, and, as usual, he felt it hard to ask a favour of a man he did not esteem. In these cases he always felt an inner dissension and dissatisfaction, and wavered whether to ask the favour or not, and always resolved to ask. Besides feeling himself in a false position among those to whose set he no longer regarded himself as belonging, who yet regarded him as belonging to them, he felt himself getting into the old accustomed rut, and in spite of himself fell into the thoughtless and immoral tone that reigned in that circle. He felt that, from the first with his aunt, he involuntarily fell into a bantering tone while talking about serious matters. Petersburg in general affected him with its usual physically invigorating and mentally dulling effect. Everything so clean, so comfortably well arranged, and the people so lenient in moral matters, that life seemed very easy. A fine, clean, and polite izvozchik drove him past fine, clean, polite policemen, along the fine, clean, watered streets, past fine, clean houses, to the house in which Mariette lived. At the front door stood a pair of English horses, with English harness, and an English-looking coachman on the box, with the lower part of his face shaved, proudly holding a whip. The doorkeeper, dressed in a wonderfully clean livery, opened the door into the hall, where in still cleaner livery, with gold cords, stood the footman, with his splendid whiskers well combed out, and the orderly on duty in a brand-new uniform. The general does not receive, and the generaless does not receive either. She is just going to drive out. Nekhludoff took out Katerina Ivanovna's letter, and going up to a table on which lay a visitor's book, began to write that he was sorry not to have been able to see anyone. When the footman went up the staircase, the doorkeeper went out and shouted to the coachman, and the orderly stood up rigid with his arms at his sides, following with his eyes a little slight lady who was coming down the stairs with rapid steps, not in keeping with all the grandeur. Mariette had a large hat on, with feathers, a black dress and cape, and new black gloves. Her face was covered by a veil. When she saw Nekhludoff, she lifted the veil off a very pretty face with bright eyes that looked inquiringly at him. "Ah, Prince Dmitri Ivanovitch Nekhludoff," she said, with a soft, pleasant voice. "I should have known." "What? You even remember my name?" "I should think so. Why, I and my sisters have even been in love with you," she said in French. "But, dear me, how you have altered! Oh, what a pity I have to go out! But let us go up again," she said, and stopped hesitatingly. Then she looked at the clock. "No, I can't. I am going to Kamenskaya's to attend a mass for the dead. She is terribly afflicted." "Who is this Kamenskaya?" "Have you not heard? Her son was killed in a duel. He fought Posen. He was the only son." terrible. The mother is very much afflicted." "Yes, I have heard of it." "No, I had better go, and you must come again, tonight or tomorrow," she said, and went to the door with quick, light steps. "I cannot come tonight," he said, going out after her, "but I have a request to make you," and he looked at the pair of bays that were drawing up to the front door. "What is this?" "This is a letter from Aunt to you," said Nekhludoff, handing her a narrow envelope with a large crest. "You'll find all about it in there. I know Countess Katerina Ivanovna thinks I have some influence with my husband in business matters. She is mistaken. I can do nothing, and do not like to interfere. But, of course, for you I am willing to be false to my principle. What is this business about?" she said, searching in vain for her pocket with her little black gloved hand. "There is a girl imprisoned in the fortress, and she is ill and innocent." "What is her name?" "Lydia Shustova. It's in the note." "All right, I'll see what I can do," she said, and lightly jumped into her little, softly upholstered, open carriage, its brightly varnished splash guards glistening in the sunshine, and opened her parasol. The footman got on the box and gave the coachman a sign. The carriage moved, but at that moment she touched the coachman with her parasol, and the slim-legged beauties, the bay mares, stopped, bending their beautiful necks and stepping from foot to foot. "But you must come, only, please, without interested motives," and she looked at him with a smile, the force of which she well knew, and as if the performance over and she were drawing the curtain, she dropped the veil over her face again. "All right," and she again touched the coachman. Nekhludoff raised his hat, and the well-bred bays, slightly snorting, set off, their shoes clattering on the pavement, and the carriage rolled quickly and smoothly on its new rubber tyres, giving a jump only now and then over some unevenness of the road. End of Book 2, Chapter 15.
Book 2, Chapter 16 of Resurrection. When Nekhludoff remembered the smiles that had passed between him and Mariette, he shook his head. "You have hardly time to turn round before you are again drawn into this life," he thought, feeling that discord and those doubts which the necessity to curry favour from people he did not esteem caused. After considering where to go first, so as not to have to retrace his steps, Nekhludoff set off for the Senate. There he was shown into the office, where he found a great many very polite and very clean officials in the midst of a magnificent apartment. Maslova's petition was received and handed on to that wolf to whom Nekhludoff had a letter from his uncle, to be examined and reported on. "There will be a meeting of the Senate this week," the official said to Nekhludoff, "but Maslova's case will hardly come before that meeting." "It might come before the meeting on Wednesday, by special request," one of the officials remarked. During the time Nekhludoff waited in the office, while some information was being taken, he heard that the conversation in the Senate was all about the duel, and he heard a detailed account of how a young man, Kaminsky, had been killed. It was here he first heard all the facts of the case which was exciting the interest of all Petersburg. The story was this. Some officers were eating oysters and, as usual, drinking very much, when one of them said something ill-natured about the regiment to which Kaminsky belonged, and Kaminsky called him a liar. The other hit Kaminsky. The next day they fought. Kaminsky was wounded in the stomach and died 2 hours later. The murderer and the seconds were arrested, but it was said that though they were arrested and in the guardhouse, they would be set free in a fortnight. From the Senate, Nekhludoff drove to see an influential member of the Petition Committee, Baron Vorobyov, who lived in a splendid house belonging to the Crown. The doorkeeper told Nekhludoff in a severe tone that the Baron could not be seen except on his reception days. that he was with His Majesty the Emperor today, and the next day he would again have to deliver a report. Nekhludoff left his uncle's letter with the doorkeeper and went on to see the Senator Wolf. Wolf had just had his lunch and was, as usual, helping digestion by smoking a cigar and pacing up and down the room when Nekhludoff came in. Vladimir Vassilievich Wolf was certainly un homme très comme il faut, and prized this quality very highly. And from that elevation he looked down at everybody else. He could not but esteem this quality of his very highly, because it was thanks to it alone that he had made a brilliant career, the very career he desired, i.e., by marriage he obtained a fortune which brought him in 18,000 roubles a year, and by his own exertions the post of a senator. He considered himself not only un homme très comme il faut, but also a man of knightly honour. By honour he understood not accepting secret bribes from private persons, but he did not consider it dishonest to beg money for payment of fares and all sorts of travelling expenses from the Crown, and to do anything the government might require of him in return, to ruin hundreds of innocent people, to cause them to be imprisoned, to be exiled because of their love for their people and the religion of their fathers, as he had done in one of the governments of Poland when he was governor there. He did not consider it dishonourable, but even thought it a noble, manly, and patriotic action. Nor did he consider it dishonest to rob his wife and sister-in-law, as he had done, but thought it a wise way of arranging his family life. His family consisted of his commonplace wife, his sister-in-law, whose fortune he had appropriated by selling her estate and putting the money into his account, and his meek, frightened, plain daughter, who lived a lonely, weary life, from which she had lately begun to look for relaxation in evangelicism, attending meetings at Aline's, and the Countess Katerina Ivanovna, Wolf's son, who had grown a beard at the age of 15, and had at that age begun to drink and lead a depraved life, which he continued to do until the age of 20, when he was turned out by his father because he never finished his studies, moved in a low set, and made debts which committed the father. The father had once paid a debt of 250 roubles for his son, then another of 600 roubles, but warned the son that he did it for the last time, and that if the son did not reform he would be turned out of the house, and all further intercourse between him and his family would he put a stop to. The son did not reform, but made a debt of 1,000 roubles, and took the liberty of telling his father that life at home was a torment anyhow. Then Wolf declared to his son that he might go where he pleased, that he was no son of his any longer. Since then Wolf pretended he had no son, and no one at home dared speak to him about his son, and Vladimir Vassilievich Wolf was firmly convinced that he had arranged his family life in the best way. Wolf stopped pacing up and down his study and greeted Nekhludoff with a friendly, though slightly ironical smile. This was his way of showing how comme il faut he was, and how superior to the majority of men. He read the note which Nekhludoff handed to him. "Please take a seat, and excuse me if I continue to walk up and down, with your permission," he said, putting his hands into his coat pockets, and began again to walk with light, soft steps across his large, quietly and stylishly furnished study. "Very pleased to make your acquaintance, and of course very glad to do anything that Count Ivan Nikolaevitch wishes," he said, blowing the fragrant blue smoke out of his mouth and removing his cigar carefully so as not to drop the ash. "I should only like to ask that the case might come on soon, so that if the prisoner has to go to Siberia she might set off early," said Nekhludoff. "Yes, yes, with one of the first steamers from Nijni. I know," said Wolf, with his patronizing smile, always knowing in advance whatever one wanted to tell him. "What is the prisoner's name?" "Maslova." Wolf went up to the table and looked at a paper that lay on a piece of cardboard among other business papers. Yes, yes, Maslova. All right, I will ask the others. We shall hear the case on Wednesday. Then may I telegraph to the advocate? The advocate? What's that for? But if you like, why not? The causes for appeal may be insufficient, said Nekhludoff, but I think the case will show that the sentence was passed owing to a misunderstanding. Yes, yes, it may be so, but the Senate cannot decide the case on its merits, said Wolf, looking seriously at the ash of his cigar. The Senate only considers the exactness of the application of the laws and their right interpretation. But this seems to me to be an exceptional case. I know, all cases are exceptional. We shall do our duty, that's all. The ash was still holding on, but had begun breaking and was in danger of falling. Do you often come to Petersburg? Said Wolf, holding his cigar so that the ash should not fall. But the ash began to shake, and Wolf carefully carried it to the ashpan, into which it fell. What a terrible thing this is with regard to Kaminsky, he said. A splendid young man, the only son, especially the mother's position, he went on, repeating almost word for word what everyone in Petersburg was at that time saying about Kaminsky. Wolf spoke a little about the Countess Katerina Ivanovna and her enthusiasm for the new religious teaching, which he neither approved nor disapproved of, but which was evidently needless to him, who was so comme il faut, and then rang the bell. Nekhludoff bowed. "If it is convenient, come and dine on Wednesday, and I will give you a decisive answer," said Wolf, extending his hand. It was late, and Nekhludoff returned to his aunt's. End of chapter 16.